HOA Karen called 911 after I spent the weekend at my own ranch, then froze when my badge flashed. Have you ever been accused of trespassing on your own property? It's a hell of a thing, being told you don't belong, especially when the land beneath your boots carries your family name. That's what happened to me last spring out on my grandfather's old ranch near Saddlebrush County. 48 hours of peace, clearing trails and mending fences, then boom, flashing lights, raised voices, and a woman built like a bulldozer in a golf cart screaming bloody murder. Karen Henley, self-installed HOA president, full-time busybody, and possibly the only person in 3 counties arrogant enough to tell a federal agent he looked suspicious with that beard. I've been off-grid all weekend. No phone, just me, my tools, and my late grandfather's workshop. My plan was simple: repair the deck, clean the rain barrels, and catch a few catfish before Sunday. This land had been ours since 1921, before roads were paved or Karen's gated community even existed. But on Sunday afternoon, while I was fixing a busted fence post near the west border, I noticed tire tracks cutting across my lot. Fresh, deep, not mine. 10 minutes later, I found out why. Karen's voice came tearing through the mesquites like a siren in a blender. "You there? Get off that land. This is HOA property, and you're trespassing." I turned. She was rolling toward me in a tricked-out golf cart, wheels caked in mud from my back road. Her face was red, tight, mean. Her HOA vest hugged her like it was fighting for survival. She had a clipboard in one hand and a walkie-talkie in the other. I raised my hand, calm as I could manage. "Ma'am, I own this ranch. Been in my family over 100 years. You're the one trespassing." Wrong words. Karen gasped like I'd insulted her ancestors. "That is a false claim. I have jurisdiction over this section per revised HOA boundary expansion guidelines," she barked, quoting some made-up code from a document I never signed. I laughed. "Lady, I'm not even in your HOA." Her eyes bulged. Her jowls trembled. "We extended the boundaries in January. I filed the paperwork myself." I stepped forward. "You drove across 2 barbed gates to get here. Want to explain that to a sheriff?" She didn't answer, just picked up her phone and dialed 911. I heard her say, "Yes, there's a strange man in tactical gear with a weapon wandering around an HOA-controlled area. Possibly dangerous. I feel very threatened." I blinked. I was wearing a tan field vest with a utility belt and a sidearm standard off-duty gear for a U.S. Marshal. She knew none of that, of course, but she would. 10 minutes later, 2 sheriff's cruisers pulled up, sirens silent, dust clouds rising behind them. The younger deputy stepped out with a hand on his holster, clearly expecting some kind of standoff. Karen rushed toward him, gasping for breath as she pointed at me. "That's him. That's the trespasser. I want him removed." I stood still, hands by my sides, and let the deputy approach. "Sir," he began cautiously, "do you have identification?" I nodded, pulled my wallet slowly from my vest pocket, and flipped it open. The gold badge caught sunlight like a mirror. U.S. Marshal. The young deputy blinked. His hand dropped from his holster. His face went pale. "Karen?" Karen froze. Actually, she stumbled backward, nearly tipping her golf cart. "I didn't know," she stammered, eyes locked on the badge. "Nobody told Mayhay wasn't wearing a uniform. This is all a misunderstanding." I looked at the deputy and said, "She just made a false emergency call, trespassed on federal property, and damaged my perimeter fencing." The other officer, older, walked up and whispered something to his partner. The young one nodded, then turned back to Karen. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stay right here." She tried to spin some wild excuse about protecting neighborhood interests and claimed the land was still under review for future HOA expansion. My face must have said, "What kind of nonsense is this?" Because both deputies exchanged a glance. And that's when twist number 1 hit her like a brick. I pulled out a file folder from my Jeep, full of land deeds, aerial survey maps, and a printed legal injunction filed 3 months earlier, an injunction blocking any annexation attempts by the Saddlebrush HOA due to an ongoing fraud investigation. Guess whose signature was forged on the annexation attempt? Karen's. Right there, in ink. dated 3 weeks before she ever set foot near my ranch. One of the deputies looked stunned. The other pulled out a body cam and said, "I need to record a formal statement, ma'am." Karen began to sweat. Big beads rolled down her face as she collapsed onto the back seat of the golf cart. "It was just a misunderstanding," she mumbled, but her eyes said panic. Deep panic. Then came twist number 2. The sheriff himself showed up. Apparently, this wasn't the first time Karen had cried wolf. Not by a long shot. She had a record of filing false reports on a dog walker, a retired firefighter, and a delivery driver she claimed looked like a criminal. The sheriff greeted me by name. "Marshal Klein," he nodded. "Didn't realize it was your ranch she wandered onto this time." "She's been trying to claim it through HOA annexation," I said. He chuckled grimly. "She tried the same thing with County Lot 17 last fall. Didn't end well either." Karen moaned, face pale, mascara streaked from sweat. She looked like a melted wax doll on the verge of short-circuiting. I turned to her one last time. "This land belonged to my grandfather, and now it belongs to me. You got no power here, no claim, and no excuse." And in that moment, she knew it. She was no longer feared, no longer the queen of cul-de-sac politics, just a trespasser, exposed by her own arrogance, choking on the reality that she'd finally messed with someone she couldn't intimidate. Karen didn't say another word as the sheriff called for a tow truck to remove her HOA-labeled golf cart from my land. The irony? She'd plastered the words "Private Security HOA Enforcement" across the side of it in crooked vinyl letters. But that badge she wore? Completely fake. The sheriff confirmed it. "Impersonating a public officer," he muttered, shaking his head. "That alone can carry jail time." She whimpered as they took pictures of the tire tracks across my ranch's wildflower field, freshly restored native habitat my wife and I had been working on for months. The destruction was undeniable. Her tires had flattened a quarter-acre of rare bluebonnets, and that gave the state wildlife officer who showed up soon after reason to slap on an additional environmental violation fine. That's right. On top of the trespassing, false emergency report, and fraudulent HOA annexation, Karen was now looking at a federal conservation charge. By noon, the press had arrived. Apparently, someone from the sheriff's office leaked the story. Fake HOA president calls cops on U.S. Marshal, then gets caught with forged deeds and a fake badge. Within an hour, the clip of Karen pointing and screaming had gone viral. She became a meme before she even got home. Her HOA board tried to save face. They sent out a mass email calling the situation unfortunate and blaming Karen's overzealous passion for community protection. But that didn't work, because I released the full body cam footage, and it was damning. The video showed her invading my property, opening my gate without consent, yelling baseless accusations, and ultimately melting down when confronted by the truth. Thousands of people saw it, including her own neighbors. The Saddlebrush HOA collapsed in 2 weeks. The board voted unanimously to dissolve the current leadership, citing irreparable damage to community trust. Karen? She was not only removed, but banned from ever holding any future position within the any HOA in the state. Her home went up for sale quietly. Rumor was she fled to her sister's place in Oklahoma. The Karen cart, as locals now call it, was auctioned for charity. I signed it. Someone painted flames on the side and gave it to a volunteer fire station. As for my ranch, I filed for a permanent conservation easement, which blocks any residential development or annexation from ever reaching my land again. It's now federally protected wildlife, fences, trails, and all. A month later, I returned to the fence post where it all started and screwed in a new brass plate my daughter had made. It read, "Klein Ranch since 1921. Not for sale. Not for stealing." That weekend, I hosted a cookout. Old neighbors, new ones, veterans, rangers, farmers. People from all walks of life who'd been bullied or burned by Karen's HOA reign. We ate under the stars. No fences, no fines, no phony bylaws. Just people, free again. And as the sun dipped behind the hill, someone asked me if I regretted confronting her head-on. I thought about it. Thought about the years she'd spent pushing people around with fake rules and empty threats. Thought about the lies, the fear, the silence she built her little empire on. And I just smiled. Sometimes I said, it takes a badge to stop a bully. So now let me ask you, was Karen protecting the neighborhood that day? Or is she just finally caught in the light? The end.